My name is Hassan. Firstly, I want to thank the professor for this opportunity to share a topic of what I would call intellectual discombobulation. I believe this topic that I'm about to showcase correlates kind of perfectly with cultural studies because, as we know, religion isn't just a private belief. It is one of the central forces that shape cultures into what they are. Having said that, the law that I'm about to showcase will allow us to have tremendous insight into understanding why certain worldwide global events take place, like the never-ending nonsensical wars in the Middle East, for instance. Because if we try to understand them on a geopolitical lens, they often make no sense, but eschatologically, they make perfect, albeit strange sense. That's why today we're moving beyond the surface to look at something called the Law of Eschatological Convergence, and don't let the title intimidate you, it's not as complicated as it sounds. But before we proceed, just a quick disclaimer, this presentation isn't intended to be a theological endorsement, nor a sectarian polemic, nor even a conspiratorial fanatic rant from me. Rather, this is a clinical, expository analysis of how different Abrahamic faiths interpret the end of time. So having said that, throw on your seatbelts and let's get started. So, what is eschatology? Eschatology simply is that part of theology that's concerned with death, judgment, and the final destiny of humankind as a whole. And convergence, it simply means these overlaps, these common points between these eschatologies, and throughout them, we can make some startling conclusions. And in order to quantify this, and before we move any further, we have to look at something called the universal law of game theory, and it's going to allow us to have a foundation of what I'm about to explain. Universal law of game theory is an equation that constitutes three variables. First one is mass, which denotes the sheer amount of the collective. In other words, how many team members are there? Times double the energy, and energy refers here to the focus, energy, determination, how determined the team members are to win. And we have the most powerful variable, quadruple coordination. And this one right here refers to synchronicity. And there are some elements that can dictate the strength or the efficacy of this variable right here, which are, apart from a leader or the family having the same bloodline, there is the narrative. And narrative ultimately is the same as eschatology because it is a sequence of events that leads to an ultimate end. Now, one thing we need to understand about eschatology is that it acts as a victor. It forces a certain religion to go towards a certain path. And unfortunately, the more violent and extreme an eschatology is, the most likely it's going to manifest. Because despite the fact that it's believed by a minority, that minority are the ones who are in position of power. They're the ones who are willing to do whatever it takes. They are well coordinated, right? So, that's why today we're going to look specifically at different extreme versions of eschatology, starting with the Jewish eschatology, or the accelerationist eschatology, secondly the Christian Zionist, and lastly the Islamic eschatology. Starting off with the Jewish eschatology. So, as we know, the Israelites a long time ago were expelled from Jerusalem by pissing off God, by disobeying Him. They ordered them to obey to Him, but they refused. So by that, they were expelled from Jerusalem and were forced to wander in diaspora for centuries. So each one of the Jews, they realized that we should do something about this. They realized that they should engage in an act of redemption. And after realizing how inferior and incapable they are in front of God, they realized that this act of redemption should be complete obedience, to be good, faithful people, to love their neighbor as though they love themselves. But then you have these extreme fanatics. They have a different eschatology, and we can call them the accelerationists. They want to force the end. They say this traditional mainstream eschatology is good and fine, but it's way too slow. If you believe in God, they say, then you should want to accelerate the arrival of the Messiah as much as humanly possible. They see it as a divine responsibility, as an obligation to take matters into their own hands. And of course, the Jews, the mainstream Jews, they hear of this and they're like, this is blasphemy, it's heresy, it's wrong, it's like the worst possible sin you can ever make. And there's a 30-second video that I want to show you guys right here. This is Rabbi Shearson, who's the founder of the Shabbat Lubavitch movement. And right here is a young Benjamin Netanyahu. And this video was taken in 1990, and I want you to pay close attention to what he's about to say. Okay, so as you can clearly guys see is that the rabbi is urging Benjamin to hurry things up. He's telling him, hours are passing by and Messiah is not here. And what does Benjamin say? He nods his head, he says, we're doing. And this constitution has already a plan in motion. And these accelerations, they realized in order to do this, they first have to create Israel, usher Jews diaspora to Jerusalem, build the third temple by destroying the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and which will trigger the war of Gog and Magog. And by extension, it will lead to something called the Messianic Age, which God is going to come to earth and build heaven on earth, and Jews are going to live in prosperity for the rest of time. So Jewish eschatology would go on to influence the Protestants to create a movement called Christian Zionism, which is right here, and it is centered on an idea or a concept called premillennial dispensationalism. And it essentially claims that God has two separate plans. One for the people of heaven, which are the Christians, and one for the people of earth, the Jews. And there is a key difference between Jewish and Christian visions. The Jews see this entity as the Messiah. The Christians perceive him as the Antichrist, and this deceiver is expected to create havoc and chaos on earth, which will lead for Jesus to arrive so that he saves God's chosen people. And following, it will happen a very important biblical event called the rapture, in which all the true believers are going to ascend to heaven, leaving all the Jews on earth to suffer in a phase called the tribulation, leaving them with the last resort of survival is to convert to Christianity. And there are some two illustrations that I want to show you real quick that showcases or demonstrates this sacralizing tone within this eschatology of the politicians. And right here we have a picture of Donald Trump depicting himself as Jesus, the Savior. Of course, this is an AI-generated image, and he did actually post it on his Truth socials like 2 weeks ago or something. And the second picture I want to quickly show you is in the Oval Office, and you can see all the members right here putting their hands on Trump as if he's some sort of divine creature, as if someone who has like a divine purpose and mission to accelerate the second coming of Jesus. And lastly, we arrive to the Islamic eschatology, which acts ultimately as the countervector to the aforementioned eschatologies. And it's centered around the arrival of the Mahdi, who unifies the Ummah, the Islamic Ummah, so that they march against the Antichrist or the Dajjal, which follows up with the return of Isa or Jesus to complete the victory, and following it, the event of the resurrection or the day of judgment. Now to the most interesting point of this, convergence. As I said earlier, biological interpretation of the eschatologies, we can make some conclusions and see some common points. So the first one is that greater Israel party will be achieved. Pax Americana is going to become Pax Judaica. The global hegemon of power will move on from America to Israel. Secondly, the destruction of Al-Aqsa Mosque in order to build the third temple. And thirdly, the rise of anti-Semitism. Fourth, war of Gog and Magog is going to be triggered. And lastly, the United States and China are not going to partake in these eschatologies, meaning that something is going to happen to these nations that's not going to make them significant anymore. And with that, I wrap up my presentation. Thank you so much for your attention. And by the way, if you guys are interested in stuff like this, I do make some short form content online, covering some similar topics like this. And that's pretty much it. I'm very grateful guys for listening and for the opportunity. Thank you guys so much. And any questions?